Here I am under the age of 25 with my first child and pregnant with my second, and there were moments where I did break down. Nobody can make you happy. No one can give you peace. That's something you can only achieve by yourself. And I think this was another moment when I realized I had kind of like lost myself. I was just like, I'm sorry, I'm just not ready. And I left and I cried because I realized that I just completely forgot who I was again.
All right, so welcome to the Monk with Braids podcast. In this podcast, I bring inspirational people with inspirational stories. And today, I have a mother of four, founder of CoffeeWithAnExpat community, and she has been an expat for 25 years. Navine, welcome to my podcast. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me.
Tell me about your journey of being an expat for 25 years. That's a very long time. That's more. You've been an expat for longer than I have lived on Earth.
Oh, really?
That's so crazy to me.
Well, that tells you something about my age then, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Expat has been pretty much my life. I've been an expat longer than I was not an expat, I would say. So I suppose really it can just start from the fact that I was already born and raised in Australia to immigrant parents.
Yeah.
And then I went to Egypt for holiday, ended up not leaving because I got engaged, and then I got married, and then I had my first child. And from there, with my husband's company, we started really moving around the world. And so we went from Egypt, we moved to France, where I had my second child, and then we moved to the UK where I had my third child.
Every country, new child.
That's right. And he was like, we're not moving again because you keep having children every time we move. And then we went to Switzerland. And then from there, I just got a little bit busy because the other two countries we stayed for about 3.5 years each. Then Switzerland, we were there for 2 years. Then we moved to Saudi Arabia for 2 years. Then we moved to the States for 2 years. Then we moved back to Switzerland for 2 years, and then we ended up in Dubai where we've been now for 7 years.
Wow. Yeah. And while you were in the countries, like, because that must have been so tough, right? Where you move into a country, you have like you start something, you start a community, you start, maybe a business or maybe a job, and then 2 years later you move again and you do it again, and you keep doing it. So for every country you moved to, how did you handle all of that? What was it like to move to a new country? Did you have something new every time? Did you discover a new part of yourself in every country that you moved to? Yeah, tell me about that.
Yeah, I think with every move comes with its own challenges, just depending on the country, the laws of the country, your type of visa. And I have to say that in most countries, for the spouse who's on the husband's visa, you can't actually work unless a company then sponsors you and gives you the right to work there. So to be honest with you, Australia is where I was raised. So, that was home, and a lot of lessons and life learnt in that journey. And then going to Egypt, again, for me, it was more about love, really, more than anything else. I found my husband and we got married, and it was like the honeymoon phase. I had my first child, so then came with that responsibility at a very young age. I had her just before I turned 23.
Wow.
So I was quite young. My parents were not there, so I didn't have the immediate family support, but I did have like extended family, like cousins and friends and stuff, because we are Egyptian as well. And so I think I was quite naive back then as well. I think at that age you're still really developing yourself and growing mentally and emotionally. So from there we moved to France, and France I think was probably the biggest learning as an expat. But to be honest with you, back then I didn't even know the word expat existed. Right? For me it was just like, I never knew. I just thought we're just moving around, and I think that was the first time where I really understood what it meant to be alone, to be lonely, is I would say, because here I am under the age of 25 with my first child and pregnant with my second. And there were moments where I did break down because I felt so alone. And, my husband, he was busy with his work, and he obviously, going through his own journey of being first time working out of Egypt, and adjusting to a new culture and new language and all those kind of things. So I just feel like maybe at that point he didn't quite grasp or understand what I was going through.
Of course.
But then at the same time, you know, there's a lot of things as a woman that you go through when you're pregnant and when you have a child, and,
Oh my God,
there's a lot of
hormones
those
and everything.
like that. Plus being in a very foreign country.
Also,
Yeah.
the fact that you said that in Egypt, you learned love essentially, because that the whole time you were there, it's about finding this man, and you know he becomes a part of your life and a part of your journey, and it's love. And then straight from learning about love in one country, you go to a different country and you learn about being alone.
Right.
Those are like two completely, like, not opposite, but you know they conflict with each other.
Well, they do really,
So-
because you know, you're completely right actually, and I love that you brought that up, because I think what happens is that you don't expect to feel that way. I'm like, nobody talks about that part of expat life, right? About moving to a new country and being alone, essentially. And I think that was really part of my journey of growth, because I just learned everything that happened to me as an expat that people now have information and access to. I didn't have that kind of information back then. So it really was about going through that whole challenge and journey alone,
By
basically,
yourself,
by
yeah.
myself. But at the same time, France for us was a journey of discovery, you know, discovering Europe. It was a beautiful country, probably one of our best assignments, I would say, because everything was so new to us. And just driving around and around Europe, which is what you can do when you live there. And
Well, that's what being
Yeah.
alone does, right? They say that I said this in a podcast just before, but the strength, everyone is alone to some extent, but the strength of being alone is solitude, and the weakness of being alone is loneliness. And so, in order to turn loneliness into solitude, they always say that's the moment of discovery where you find out what you want to do, what makes you happy, who you are, and you build that relationship, right? You discover yourself and your environment. And like, you're literally the epitome of that, because you're talking about how that time being alone, but also both of you being alone together created like a time of discovery for you
yes,
in France. But yeah,
yes. And I think also we were both growing up, because he was quite young as well. When we got married, I was 21 and a bit, and he was 24. So there's only 3 years. So we're both
young.
quite young, right?
Yeah.
So I think also at the same time we are growing, discovering ourselves, plus the pressure of, you know, being in a new country, plus being young parents as well. So there was a lot going on, I would say, in that period. And I think that really was my journey in France, was just grappling with that fact that, you know, I'm in this country, I'm alone, and I just have to navigate life on my own, basically. And it's just like what you said, I think, is learning to be alone without being lonely. And that's something that helped me a lot, but that was not in France, to be honest with you. It took me quite a long time to actually find that space within myself where I was alone, but I was not feeling lonely, because I was, again, confident in who I am as a woman, as a parent, as a wife, as a friend, and just being comfortable with my own company. From France, we then moved to the UK. And the UK was an interesting time for me, because, you know, I would have thought that going to an English-speaking country, I'm Australian, the UK, we have, you know, we're part of the Commonwealth, so I thought there'd be a lot of, again, very naive, there'd be very common, you know, culture and everything. It was very different for me. And I really struggled in the UK. Again, I think my life circumstances at the time, you know, within that period, I did fall pregnant with my third child. So then I had 3 children under the age of 5. We moved house twice.
3 children at the age of 25.
No, I had 3 children under the age of 5.
Under the age of 5.
Under the age of 5.
Wow.
So, you know, and then you're living in a society where, you know, they are established. You know, it's not an expat dominant community. So they don't actually need you in their life. I need them. I need people in my life, right? I'm looking for a network. I'm looking for community. I'm looking for friends. So you're trying to fit in to a space where they actually already have their own family and friends. It's their home. Right, so that was really a struggle. Again, that element of loneliness and belonging was missing for me there. I was lucky that I did make a couple of friends, but it was a bit of a struggle for me living in the UK. And I think also that period also taught me to be confident in who I am. You know, being Arab and being Muslim, and plus all the issues that were happening in the world at that time. I think it was after 9/11 as well.
Oh, so like
Yeah,
Islamophobia is
so
a
there was a lot of
thing. My
Islamophobia and
God.
stuff. And I think, and I had heard stories, and I had a friend that was also Egyptian, that's saying that she was harassed, etc., etc.
Oh my
I
God.
was lucky that never happened to me. And I think what I learned was confidence, is that when your posture, how you present yourself, how you walk down the street, I think makes you either a potential target or not. When I think that's what I learned anyway. I felt like when you look at people in the eye, you smile at them. If they had the intention to say something, they would hesitate.
Mm.
That's the impression that I kind of like got, and that's what I learned. And so I really learned to hold myself high, I would say, like, with strength. And that took a lot of energy from me, because then I had children that wanted to do activities, and I did feel a bit intimidated at the time. Like, my child wants to do tennis, and I'm like, well, there are no Arabs really that are doing tennis in this area that I'm living in.
Mm.
I'm going to go, I'm not going to fit in. And so I was starting to really close into myself. And then I thought, I cannot let that stop my children from doing the things that they love. I have to just step out of my own comfort zone and take them to do their activities, and just show the world, or show the people around there, that we're just normal people,
Yeah.
essentially. And so that, yeah, so I did that, and it was, again, a learning experience of, the strength within myself, and being able to just step out of my comfort zone, and just really doing the right thing without having that fear holding me back. So
Yeah, just before I move on to the next country, I think that this is so interesting, because the way you're talking about moving from country to country, I feel like the lessons you're talking about relate to me so much, because you're talking about love, then you're talking about being alone, and then you're talking about rediscovering yourself, finding your confidence. And so I just broke up with someone like a couple months ago, and that's exactly what my journey has been like. And so this journey of that you're talking about it's about being an expat, but also it's even bigger than that, where it relates to just kind of the journey of life in general, right? You're like going through life for the first time as a young adult, like learning all these things. And so this journey of being an expat really represents what it's like to be on the journey of life in general.
absolutely. And I think what happens with the expatriation as well is that it can repeat itself. So what I went through in the UK could actually happen again in another country, because now you go into different cultures, and then you have that journey of rediscovering who you are within this new space and new environment that you find yourself in, right? Because you learn things, and you go to a certain country with those experiences, those morals, those whatever it is that you believe in. And I think what we have to always remember is that when we move to a country, we are the ones that are moving into the country. We can't expect them to adapt to our needs.
Yeah, we have to
And I
adapt to
think a lot
them.
of expats do fall into that trap without realizing that they go to a country where English is not their first language, for example, and then they get frustrated that nobody speaks English. So we have to be very aware of that as expats when we're moving around, and that's part of our journey, and rediscovering ourselves, and really where do we stand in life and in humanity and in acceptance of different cultures. So you're constantly being challenged right throughout life, and like you said, you went through the breakup, you're rediscovering yourself, you may find another relationship.
At first it was all alone,
right,
and then it became like this confidence thing,
right,
where I'm
and
like,
then
yeah.
you'll go into another relationship eventually, and you'll start rediscovering yourself again, because it's a new person, a new personality that you're adapting to, both ways, really.
Wow,
So,
that's
yeah.
amazing. I have a question, like, do you have any specific experiences for the countries that you were in that you can share that taught you the lesson that you rediscovered? So the first one was love. Obviously that's like being married and and that. For being alone and being comfortable with being alone, is there a specific experience you can remember in France that helped you learn that? And then also for England, for UK, was there a specific experience you remember that taught you confidence, where you're like, that's an experience that was like pivotal in me?
Yeah. Yes. In France, actually, it was a moment where I was having a breakdown. I had a crying baby on arm, and I was pregnant, and I was emotional, and the only person I could call was my husband. He's in the middle of work, meetings, etc. And I called him crying, and he's like, "It's okay, just calm down." And he was very soothing, but for me, it was like, I want you home now, you know, but I didn't say it to him. I just thought if he sees that I'm upset, that he'll just come running home, right? Women are complicated sometimes. And so we ended.
Actually, women are smart. Men are like doofuses, and we need like literal words to be like, "Come home now," and then we're like, "Okay, I get it now."
Exactly. And sometimes we don't do that. So I think it was in that moment I realized I'm alone. You know, even though I have a husband that loves me and I have my child with me and I had a few friends, but essentially I'm alone. Within my own emotions, my own challenges, my own problems. And that was the moment where I kind of thought I need to be stronger. And I need to be able to learn how to manage this life alone. You know, because I've always been used to having my family around me, my parents, my siblings. And then when we go on holidays, we'd go visit family in Egypt. So I always had family around me in that sense. So it was a very new space for me to navigate. And I think that was the moment that made me realize that I am alone. But I, you know, and that I needed to do something about it, but I just didn't know how or what at that time. And again, for me, the moment in the UK where, you know, I felt like that I really needed to learn to be very confident and face the world as a confident Arab Muslim. There's a lot of history to that. So, you know, that would just need another podcast completely. Right? Because being born and raised in Australia, where at the time there were not many Muslims, not many Arabs, and I went to an Anglican community, you know, to an Anglican school where we were the only Muslim family there. So there was a lot of issues in that sense growing up of kind of being, I would say, embarrassed being Arab and saying that I'm Muslim and having that different culture amongst that society. So that was, I suppose, what influenced my lack of confidence in presenting myself as an Arab, as Muslim, being pointed at, I'd always tell my kids, shush, be quiet, because I didn't want people to think, there are those Arabs again, that kind of, stereotype that was going around the world at the time.
I had that with being Indian as well
in
school. Yeah.
So it's hard. It's challenges, I think, that many of us don't really talk about. And I think there's definitely space to have those kind of conversations. So I thought, you know what, I need to be proud of who I am. And I think being faced with such a, society where I was very local, I was no longer amongst other expats. That was the moment that made me realize I had to step it up and be confident for my kids, essentially. Is where it started from, and then it became about being confident for myself.
The moment you're talking about also reminds me, I always ran away from being alone, and by that I also mean that if I were to spend time alone, I would make content, I would get some work done, to distract myself from knowing that I'm alone right now. But there was a moment about 2 or 3 months ago where I was just in my room, and my parents weren't in Dubai at the time, and I was just, in this big house by myself, like essentially no plans, and and I just realized that in this moment right now, I'm alone. But then when I really thought about it, and I'm like, I have a roof under my head, I have food if I want to eat it, I have people that are there. Like, what's so bad about this right now? Why am I fighting being in my own company so bad? And I think when I really got down to it, I mean, other than society telling you that, that you can't be happy unless you're in a relationship, and then, you have children, you have money, whatever. Other than all of that, when I just sat by myself and I was like, is it that bad to be alone right now? And I'm like, not really. It's not that bad. So, yeah, that time alone is important, and it teaches you more about yourself. It makes you ask questions, and it makes you build that relationship with yourself. And I think when you're talking about that confidence and telling yourself, like, hey, you need to be stronger, like, you need to do it not only for you but for your kids, actually that's something that really helps when you don't only do something for yourself, and when you do something for someone else, when there's a purpose behind doing service, when there's a purpose behind doing something that's bigger than yourself, that gives you so much more strength as well. So yeah, having kids,
absolutely, it definitely helps, I would say.
Yeah.
Definitely. I think it's just, sometimes I feel like you're not in a sense forced, but like you said, you had that moment where you did find yourself alone, and you're kind of like, in a way, forced to look into why you thought that was a problem, right? So for me, I was put in that situation where I had kids that needed my attention in a different way and needed to be out in the world doing things, and I was holding back because of my own insecurities, right? So I was kind of like forced in that sense that I have to do something about that. But yes, I mean, like at the same time, you know, you said you're 25, right?
I'm 23.
Oh, you're 23. There you go. So you're still quite young.
Your oldest daughter's age, I think.
Yes, my daughter's 23. So, you know, so you're still at that phase where, you know, they say until around the age of 25, where you still really
Prefrontal cortex doesn't
really
develop
discovering
even
yourself
that
and developing yourself and really kind of becoming like finding yourself essentially and being comfortable with who you are. So the fact that you're already, you know, that you're realizing this and that you're growing into yourself is an amazing, you know, part of your life that you're in right now. So really enjoy that. I mean like life is all about up and down, right? You know, we're going to have those moments of loneliness. We're going to have moments where we feel so fulfilled and we get lonely again. And I think it's just really being able to understand how do we manage our emotions and our mental state when we do hit those moments, right? And I think that's part of the learning journey. Okay, so I felt lonely or I'm feeling very alone. Well, then I'm in a space where, you know what, I'm cool with that. Like I know how to manage if I'm starting to feel sad or I'm feeling alone, how to manage that. And I think that's really something to be aware of.
It's it's not being alone.
Yeah.
It's what it means and what it interprets. Right? Because I've had, you know, ever since I was young, I remember a time when I didn't have a ton of friends and when I was in a romantic relationship at the time, and I saw someone in a romantic relationship being romantic with their partner and they looked happy. So in my brain, I told myself, that's what happiness is. And so it's crazy how in a split second, you can create a belief that impacts you for years. That's right. Amazing thing about mental health. And sometimes it's tough, but I remember looking and I'm like, okay, so they're in a romantic relationship. They're being romantic right now physically. That means they're happy. And so I tell my mind now that in order for me to be happy, I need that.
Right?
And I remember so many moments in my life where I had all these amazing things happening and I was happy, but subconsciously I'm like, oh, but I'm not at the peak level of happiness, because if I don't have that, then, you know, then I'm not actually fully happy.
Right.
And also I remember that there was a time when I realized that, so this happened about 2 months ago. I started to enjoy time alone and to focus more on this. And so I do this thing every week now, essentially, where I take myself out on a date and I essentially read. I have a book, read, reflect, and write. And I just do that for hours, no phone. And some of the best moments I've had in my life are where I've not spent any money. I've been in some random cafe just by myself. And it's crazy that in that moment, and even when I got into relationships, I remember that because I wanted to be happy and I told my mind I want to be happy, the mind's like, okay, let me do whatever I can to make you happy as quick as possible. So even when I got into a relationship with someone, my need to be happy, or my mind's belief that I need to be happy, didn't let me pick a person that was fruitful and fulfilling and nourishing for my soul, because the fact that I wanted something so bad blinded me from picking someone that actually is good for me, because instantly I was like, that's what I wanted. Right. But yeah, I mean,
it's amazing. Like you say, sometimes we get influenced by certain things that make us believe that situation is what we need to feel fulfilled or to feel happy, like you said about those people. But essentially, you know, my question to you would be, what is happiness? Because this is, I think, what we see in society is that you need to be happy. You need to find happiness. Everything you do needs to, you know, go into the zone of happiness, right? But then happiness is not a constant. Just like sadness is not a constant. But what is a constant in life is peace, right? It's finding that peace within yourself. So once you are peaceful within yourself, the happiness comes, it's amazing. The sadness comes, you can manage it because you've got the element of peace. And I think that's what we should be chasing, actually, is where is that peace within ourselves? It's like you said, you found it, in moments of being able to read and write and do all those things where you felt the happiest. So you found peace within that. It's just a matter of that now learning how do I carry that peace with me always, and I think once you reach that state of peacefulness within yourself, and I think everyone has their own way of doing it. It's through meditation, through your faith, through prayer, whatever it is that you do, it just makes life so much easier to navigate.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So rule number 1, if you're alone, have a child.
No.
But no, okay, so thank you so much for that. And I'm deciding on whether I want to move on to the next country and the next lesson, but I kind of want to understand how did you find that peace? Is it just those moments by yourself and reflecting? Is that what gives it to you?
No, not really. I mean, I think you go through life and you have so many different events that happen to you. And I think, again, really going within yourself, understanding who you are as a person, where you stand in life, where you stand among your friends and among your family, and all those things are important as well. But I think we put a lot into that as well. Where do I stand in this relationship? How do I, what do they think of me? All those kind of things. And I think what we need to do is actually remove all of that. That's just noise, really, essentially, because nobody can make you happy. No one can give you peace. That's something you can only achieve by yourself. And I think really kind of again, going through certain experience and maybe seeing hardship, experiencing hardship, being more humble from those events as well. I think all of those different elements that I kind of went through made me reach a point of, you know what, life actually is good. I have my faith, I have, like you said, a roof over my head, I have money, I have all these things. And actually, I feel like the test is harder for us when we do have all those things, because it becomes a very materialistic kind of world state of mind as well. And I think basically just kind of letting go of all of that and digging into yourself and thinking, what is it that I really need? And for me, it was I just need to be at peace with life, understanding that everything happens for a reason, understanding that if something bad is going to happen, there is a solution. It may not happen straight away. I may not understand it, but with patience and with just acceptance,
detachment,
detachment, you kind of let it flow. And this is me, though. This is who I am as a person as well. I've always kind of let things flow. I'll go with the flow. I'll adapt. I'll just let things happen and work out. And I know that eventually the right thing will happen. I'll just do my best, and that's really how I achieved the peace of myself. So it's not so easy for me to be bothered by a lot of things, because for me, it's just at the end of the day, in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't really matter. When it's something a bit more, major or, like what we're currently seeing in the world now, yeah, obviously that does shake you and makes you step out and kind of have to face that in a bigger, deeper way. But I think the general state is to just let things go.
Yeah, I love that. And just before we move on to the next one, what you're saying is so beautiful, because I think you're talking about your mind and where that stands. You have your brain, you have your mind, and then you have your soul. I think we're so constantly connected to this thing that has this inner dialogue and of how things are going in the world. And what I've personally realized is that realistically, your mind wants control. Your mind and ego, it wants control. But the outside world, technically, you can't really control anything, right? And so we create an inner dialogue of everything that's going on the outside we can't control, because when we put it inside, in our mind, that's something we can control. And so we create this, the ego and the mind always wants a narrative. It always wants a story and narrative, because that's its way of living and understanding and controlling. But realistically, life is about adventure. Life is about not knowing. In a year or two, you could you could find someone who's, either a romantic partner or a friend that becomes your best friend, and you could be doing a business opportunity. There could be so many things like that happen this week. This week you could find someone that's going to be the love of your life. This week you could, so many things can change, but the ego and the narrative, it tries to control you and keep you, it tries to keep you safe and secure. So it's not necessarily a bad thing, but you have to have some adventure in your life. You got to try new things, I think.
Absolutely. And I think we're always in this protective mode. And I think it's how our mind works. It wants to protect us, right? And this is why I think by nature, most of us are quite negative, expecting the worst to happen, right? Naturally. But I think also what helped me as well is just letting go of expectations.
That's a big one.
Yeah. I think that really helped me a lot. It's just once you learn to not have expectations from anyone, even your partner, expectations for them to make you happy, expectations to do this, or if from friends, from work colleagues, from anyone, I think it just helps significantly in how you go about life, because you find yourself then doing things because you want to do it, not because you're expecting anything in return or expecting a certain response or expecting whatever it is there may be, so.
Or because it's something that you believe society and the people expect from you.
Right.
So it's like bi-directional, right? It's
Exactly.
like you're not doing things because you expect, and you're not doing things because you think that's what they expect of you. You're just being authentic to yourself.
Exactly.
And then that's what makes you confident, because you're like, wow, I'm actually doing this for myself. I'm doing what I truly want.
Exactly.
Wow.
And you need to be conscious of that as well, because sometimes you do get influenced. We're human at the end of the day. You do get influenced, and you do get caught up in society and those expectations that start to creep up onto you. And I think is that when you're fully aware of yourself and what your purpose in life is being able to take a step back and then refocus and let go of those expectations again, and really just like dive into whatever it is that you're doing and being your authentic self, like you said.
I guess that's how you move from loneliness to solitude, from weakness to strength. It's taking that time, and I know it's tough, but taking that time as a time to grow and rediscover yourself, and for you to let go of something you don't need anymore, whether it's a belief or a habit, to let go of that. Because realistically, if you're not happy where you are and you want to change, you want happiness, you want whatever it is, the reason you don't have it is because you need to change something, right? So there's something you need to let go of, and there's something you need to create space for you to accept, right? But yeah, okay, so
yes.
yeah, so that's what the UK taught you, confidence, and France taught you, how to have that time in solitude and be comfortable with being alone. Where did you go next?
We went to Switzerland next.
Okay.
And for me, Switzerland was really about breaking barriers. And that's where, again, it was the first time I had all three kids go to school. Again, I found myself in this space where I was very unfamiliar with. I was alone on my own. I had free time. And I think most mothers that have children, they all go to school, find themselves in this space as well. But then I'm in a foreign country. Where again I didn't know anyone in Switzerland at the time, and so I thought, okay, maybe I can get involved in the school somehow. Maybe it could be a way for me to meet people. So I think at the time it's called the PTA, the Parent Teacher Association, or something like that. And I saw some women that I admired, and they were American, and I felt like there was a barrier. This is and they're probably, if they hear this, probably thinking, I don't know how they'll think about this, but this is my perspective anyway. And I felt like there was a barrier again because everything that was happening in the world. And for me, I thought, I want to be their friend, and
I'm going to make you be friends with me.
Well, not make you. I thought for me, it was like about breaking those barriers again, letting people, because from what I recall, I think it was their first time out of America. It's their first expat assignment. So again, it's just having that kind of exposure to the different cultures and the different religions. And, I think naturally that does come with barriers, right? Because you're unsure how to speak to certain people and how will they respond, etc. And for me as well, it was a new experience because I've always been so busy with children. I never really had the time to go out and make friends that I want to make, right? So I kind of I I liked them. I was like watching them in the PTA, and I thought like they seemed like really nice ladies. I'd like to get to know them and become my friends. And again, this is another, I suppose, inner conflict within me, is that I'm Egyptian and I'm Australian, and there are parts of me that are more Australian than I am Arab. You know what I mean? And I feel like that I had that point in time, my comfort was really to be amongst the more, non-Arab side of society. And I find myself gravitating to these type of people more. And so I thought I'd like to be friends with them. And I think for me, it was just a challenge within myself. It's like, I want them to meet me. I want them to know that we are good people again, and to break those barriers that society has created amongst the different cultures and the different religions and things like that. So that's really what I learned, and I achieved it, and we're still friends till today. So,
and I want to take this opportunity to literally, this journey that you're talking about is what the journey of being alone and being confident, like this is a direct representation of literally how my life is. So when I'm hearing you say this, I'm like, wow, I'm going through these stages right now. So first you're alone. First you have the good experiences, love, all of that. Then you have the alone. Then you have, the confidence building. And then it's time for you to be adventurous now that you've built the confidence to try new things and to explore and to do all of these things. So yeah, I want people to pay attention to like every part of this rediscovery, because it's shocking to me how it's so relatable to what I'm going through right now. I'm excited to hear what comes next.
Oh, really?
Because I'm in the place where I'm waiting now. So
yeah. So that was really my experience. And I have to say it was probably the best 2 years, in terms of friendship at the beginning of my expat journey. An amazing group of friends that I've made, their acceptance of me for who I am, just the way I am. And again, that was another learning journey, because I feel like that we always try to conform. We always try to change to fit in a certain society or a certain group of people. And then you just don't become the person that you actually are. And that doesn't last very long. You become very unhappy doing that.
Yeah, because you're being loved for who you're not.
Right, exactly. Only because you want to have friends, right? I think a lot of us do because we want to be friends with somebody or fit in a society where we don't really fit in. And I think that comes with the confidence, again, of just being who you are and knowing that the right people will stay in your life and the ones that are not supposed to be there will leave. And that is okay, right?
And the journey is important, because you needed to be alone before for you to be comfortable with that, so that now when you're put in a situation, you've already done it before, so you're comfortable now, and now you can move on to exploring and doing that.
Absolutely. And I really do believe that events happen in your life to prepare you for the future.
Yeah.
Right. And I mean,
that's everything you're saying right now. It's one thing prepares you for the next.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Right. Because I think sometimes, like I said at the beginning, sometimes you don't understand why something happens, but you'll understand it later, because that moment prepared you emotionally, mentally, physically, whatever it was, to face something bigger in the future, so you can manage, so you can cope. And I think this is just the way we're created as humans, really, just to be able to cope. So.
And you have to ask yourself, what, rather than why is this happening, like why me and all that, which I've done many, many times, but it's like, okay, this is where I'm being led. What can I do here? It's always about, I think that's another thing about happiness. It's like when you're unhappy or not content, it's like you failing to see other options, because you're like, I'm not happy with where I am. These are my options. I'm not happy with my options. So finding more options, finding more opportunities will help you with that. But I like what you said, because you're like, I'm in a situation, and yes, maybe it's a bit tough, but it's like, what now? It's always about what can I do differently? And that's exactly.
Yeah, I think it's like, what are you learning from this moment? Because we're always learning.
Or what's this? Yeah. What is? Because I believe in God. I'm religious as well. What is God trying to show me? That's what I always think. Like, and I always have that communication with God as well. Where I'm like, I'm not happy where I'm with what I have right now. I kind of gave you what I think my life should be like, and it's a teamwork, right? You think that you're in a team with God, and it's you and God creating this life together, like as a collective. But you think that you have created a way of how you think things should work, and you have that expectation. We were talking about expectations, and when things don't go to what you have planned, which I don't know why we think that everything is going to go that way, we get sad. But it's like we give what we think is, how we want things to play, and then we leave room to that detachment. We leave room where we're like, okay, so it's not going like this. What am I trying to be shown? What is God trying to show me? And you kind of find those options and you go for them.
Absolutely. I think in life you can have, and it's good to have goals and to have like dreams and where you want to go in life. And again, I think it comes down to what they say is like, enjoy the journey, not the destination, because that destination that you think you should reach may not be the destination you should be at, right? So I think it's really important that, we have a certain goal that we want to achieve, but also be open to change. Because like you said, we can plan all you like, but we can't control life circumstances sometimes, and just throws you off completely and takes you on a completely different direction. Or it may just make you take another pathway for a while and bring you back again. Like a classic example would be COVID, right? So we all had plans. We're going to be doing this, we're going to be doing that. And then overnight we were stuck in home for God knows how long, and our lives changed completely, globally, at a global scale as well. So I think definitely having that kind of flexibility, and like we said, not really have those expectations, and be open to change is so important.
Yeah. I think before we move on to the next one, I feel like every time you move, it's an opportunity to learn, explore, experiment, and discover.
Absolutely.
That's like every country gives you that.
Absolutely.
So what did you learn, explore, experiment, and discover in the next country that you were in?
So the next country, from Switzerland, we went to Saudi Arabia.
Wow, that's a very
right.
Very, very different.
It was very different.
Okay. And at that time as well?
Right. It's not as open as it was, as it
right
is today,
now, and
right? So it's a bit different. We're living on a compound. It was a very intimate compound, I would say. So, you essentially become friends with the people around you, your neighbors, and the community there. But yeah, I found it not so easy to live there, I would say. Again, if you're very independent and you're used to doing things your own way and be able to just jump in the car and drive and things like that, at the time, you couldn't do that. You were really reliant on transportation and, really just following the laws of the country. But at the same time, I made some amazing friends in that time. I was thrown into essentially not different cultures, more of my own culture, the Arab culture, which I, in some ways, was not so involved in. And that was beautiful, actually, to be able to see the different Arab cultures that were there, a lot of Syrian, Lebanese. So, we are all Arabs, but we all have our own unique cultures as well at the same time. So that was really, really, really beautiful. And again, it was just really, I wouldn't say that Saudi taught me too much in that sense, because it was actually quite quick, considering that the time that I spent there, on paper we were there for 2 years, but it was less than that because I traveled a lot to Australia and so forth. So it really was just about living, really, more than anything else, just having friends and just enjoying the time that we could there. And I was really busy with my children swimming, so they were all swimming at the time, doing competitions. But yeah, I think Saudi was not.
And I guess that's another part of life where it's like we're constantly growing, and it's this next thing, and at some point it's like, you know what, just experience this for a bit before we move on to the next stage.
Right. And for me, it's just the minute that my husband said we have an opportunity to leave, I was like, yes,
let's do it.
Let's just go anywhere.
All these friends, I love you, but bye.
Yeah. Well, I think it's, again, one of those places is either you love it, and a lot of people do love living in Saudi. A lot of Western people love living in Saudi, or you don't. And for me, it just didn't work. It was not working for me personally. But yeah, so we then moved to the States. And I think in the States, again, was a bit of a learning curve for me. I remember my first time I went out. So my neighbor very kindly, dropped off some brownies, and this is very new again for me. Like, they don't know who we are, but yet they're knocking on the door, giving us brownies. She invited me out to go with her friends, just to, get me acquainted. And I remember sitting there, and they are speaking English, and I couldn't understand a word they were saying.
No way.
Like, I couldn't understand a thing that they were saying. Like,
because of the accent?
It was, I think it was the accent and the way they were forming their sentences, and I suppose the nuances and all these things that I'm just not accustomed to. It was very different. It's like speaking a different language, essentially. So I was just like smiling and nodding my head, and I really didn't understand what was going on at all. And that was like for me, wow, that's very interesting. But yeah, I like in the States again.
Where in America was it? Because I know some accents are
Cincinnati, Ohio.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's not that
so
bad.
I was a bit of a novelty there, and that was very interesting. So every time I opened my mouth, people would look at me like, we're not expecting that accent to come out of you.
Yeah.
Like, that was the first time I felt like I had an accent, because every time I spoke, people were just like, were thrown off, and they're like, can you just say another word? There was, I was a bit of a novelty at the time in terms of that. And I think there for me, I did grow a bit more and started to really kind of like discover myself again in a different way, in the sense that I was finally in a position where I could work. My 3 kids at the time were all in school. They're older, a bit more independent. We thought we were going to stay there for a very long time. So we ended up building a home. So then we built a home, and we lived in it for 6 months, and then we were told that we're moving again to Switzerland. So we only managed to stay in the States for about 2 years. So then on to Switzerland the second time. I would say that was a very pivotal moment for me in many ways. Again, I was doing real estate, moved to Switzerland, and I thought, I don't want to do real estate here. It's not really.
I could kind of, I could see you as a realtor.
Really?
I don't know why, but you have something in you where I'm like, I could see that. It makes sense.
Okay.
Something about it makes sense.
Well, look, I enjoyed it for what it was and where it was. There was a purpose behind it, why I got into real estate, and there was a bigger journey behind it that didn't, become reality because we moved. And actually, I made some amazing friends in the States as well, and that's where I joined my first kind of like expat community, which was attached to my husband's company, and that's where really I thrived, and I met some amazing women. And actually, it's where the name of CoffeeWithAnExpat was realized. Was in the States back then, because it was going to be a blog, and this was with a friend that I was having coffee with. And realizing, we always meet for coffee, we share stories. Well, why don't we start a blog and we call it CoffeeWithAnExpat, and we share other expat women stories. So that's, back then that blogs were the in thing to be creating. And then obviously I moved, and she got busy with other things, and that never happened. So then, and then going back to Switzerland.
I need to find this blog somewhere.
Oh, it's non-existent.
It's deleted now?
No, well, we didn't really get to do it.
We
were working on it because it was an idea, but then it never flourished into anything because I ended up moving. But yeah, we had the idea, and with planning that and everything, but we didn't come to surface, unfortunately.
I would have loved to have seen like a story from it. But okay, yeah.
And then when I moved to Switzerland, I kind of like loved the name CoffeeWithAnExpat, and also I was very passionate about my expat life. So I kept the name, obviously with permission of my friend first, and just created an Instagram account just to share my expat life. This was basically what it was for, sharing my travels and things like that. But I always felt that there was something more to it. There's something bigger for me to give, but I just wasn't really sure what. And I had this drive or this need to start create a following on this account with no reason. I just had this need to do it. I just didn't know why though. But I just felt like I was going to do something with it. And then moving to Switzerland, like I was saying, I just didn't feel I wanted to go into real estate again, even though my husband encouraged me, you're really good at it, maybe it's a great market to be on. Like, no, I just don't want to go back into that. It's stressing me out, and I just don't want to be stressed. So I thought, I always loved fashion, and I was just like, my spare time, I'll just design things.
Mm.
So I thought, I'll start my own fashion line, as one does. So I just started doing that, went to a couple of, shows in Paris to find fabrics and talk to different
Wow.
suppliers, and bought some really nice fabrics and everything. And I found an Italian seamstress that was looking for work. So
Oh my
she'd
God,
come
that sounds
in.
so fancy.
Yeah, well, it sounds fancy, but it was.
I went to France to Fashion
Yeah, well, exactly.
Week,
This
and I
is-
got fabric, and then I went to Italy where Gucci originates.
So I kind of like stopped the fashion side of things and just put all of my energy in being able to see how I help the Syrian refugees that were coming through. And they were not just Syrian, actually. There were a few from other countries that kind of like came through as well. But I think the main focus at the time, because of what was happening, was the Syrian refugees that were coming through the country. So I created this Facebook group, and within 2 weeks we had a couple of thousand people on there.
Wow, couple thousand.
And this was, again, serving all of Switzerland. And Switzerland, when you look at it, like, you can drive to other parts of Switzerland in a day and come back. So it's not so big. And it's just from there, really, that I found myself organizing and coordinating bigger donation drives. And then my basement became the place for storage and organization of these donations as well. So again, I discovered certain strengths and skills that I didn't know I had doing this. We organized donation drives to Greece. We organized donation drives to Eastern Europe. We were helping to furnish the homes that the refugees were eventually given, like from TVs to carpets to beds to cutlery and kitchenware. And what was beautiful out of this experience was how giving society is and was, that they were just giving constantly. Like, can you imagine, you just give a TV, and so we were able to help in that way to make them feel like that they have a home, and to make them as comfortable as possible with the limited means that they had at the time. And then discovering also the amazing cooking skills of some of these women, cooking the Syrian food. And so then they would cater for certain things, or we'd just order our dinner from them, and we're just finding different ways to support them financially as well, and letting them work without them feeling, because I think what we tend to also forget sometimes is that refugees does not mean that these people are unskilled or uneducated, or that they didn't have a life and they didn't have money and they didn't have all these things. So it was really important that when the donations were coming through, that these are items that I would wear. I'm not going to give them something that was old and dirty and ripped.
Yeah.
For example, that we have to acknowledge that these people are educated. They want to work for their money. They don't want to just be given money. And we have to be very aware and respectful of that as well. So it was a very eye-opening experience, in a space where I really learned and grew so much as a person. So I think, that taught me so much. And I have to say that it was really the happiest, most fulfilling, as difficult as it was to witness and see.
That's so interesting, because it seems like, okay, you go from a place where you're kind of finding yourself, you're building the strength within yourself from Egypt and UK and France, like, you're building this confidence. And then you're like, okay, I have this confidence now. Let me try doing real estate. Let me try doing this. And it's you're trying to create this thing, but then you get put in a direction where it's, no, stop doing these things. Focus on something more meaningful, fulfilling to you personally. And it's funny looking back at it now because of everything you're doing now, but that's where you learned about the idea of how strong a community can be for people.
Right, exactly. And I for me, it wasn't about fulfilling myself, because I honestly, at the time, I was doing it because I felt that there was a need. These people needed help. But through the process, or through that journey, I learned how fulfilling it was for myself. So it was, finding yourself in a situation just to help, to that becoming something much bigger and becoming actually the core purpose of your life. At the time, for me, everything revolved around it. Everything I did was revolving around that. Like I said, like, my basement became the space where people would come and help me sort out the donations and box them and pack them and ship them off, and coordinating the different drop-off points throughout the country and getting that all delivered. And so there was a lot of stuff happening and going on there. And I just found myself that I didn't want to stop. I didn't want to stop helping, and I just felt so happy and so fulfilled, and felt like, this is what life is about. It's not just about me. It's not just about my family. It's not just about my friends. It's about making life better for other people, because they have that right, and just because they find themselves in difficult circumstances, or their life situation does not allow them to be maybe financially comfortable like we are, does not mean that they are lesser than we are as humans. And that's why I think when you hit that point, or you have that realization, that's where you start to really treat people, no matter who they are, where they come from, as equal humans.
Wow. That's so admirable.
Sorry, this is
no
much deeper than
That's so admirable that you created something so community based and purposeful and fulfilling, and I'm sure somewhere down the line all of that's going to come back to bless you, and I think it already has in some ways, because all the lessons you learned from doing that. At the time, what did your family think?
Oh, what did my family think? My kids were.
Did they understand what was going on and what you were doing?
Yeah, they understood. Obviously, my husband was very supportive.
Yeah.
And again, it comes down to a big part of it to do with our faith. Again, intention is super important why you do certain things. And we get taught within our faith that when you do charity work, you're not doing it to show that you're doing charity work.
Yeah.
Okay, it's to be like, I'm speaking about it now because it's something that I've done. And for me, I believe that by sharing my experience, I'm also hopefully inspiring other people to kind of like look at life in a different way. But at the same time, it's nothing to boast about, right? It's something you're doing for the good of others. So yeah, no, it was an amazing experience. I'm like, I know sometimes I got very busy, and maybe my family felt at the time, but they never complained, to be honest with you. And then I got pregnant with my fourth child while this was all happening.
That's God's blessing to you for the charity work.
That's it. But I still didn't stop.
I mean, it makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Like, fulfillment is essentially you feel content, you feel like I feel fulfilled, like I feel full from this moment right here. And I think, I always talk about this relationship we have with God, and I think that in terms of purpose, our purpose is to serve, our purpose is to do these things, and that's kind of like set in stone. But the way in which that we have, our ability to do things for ourselves, and not everything is in the hand of God, but at some point, like, you also have control, right? So I feel like overall we have this thing where it's like, okay, the purpose of us is to serve humanity, serve God, serve our fellow people. The way in which we want to do that is up to us.
Right. So we have the choice, basically.
Yeah. So we have some choice, but overall, like, why we're here is kind of set in stone. But that makes so much sense. Like, obviously you're going to feel fulfilled when you're doing what you're meant to do on earth, like why you're here.
Absolutely.
So
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think it all happens at the right time. Like, it was like, I think my life lessons and my life journey made me ready for that moment. To do all the things that I was able to do. The things I learned as a mother, moving from country to country, adapting to change, different cultures, personalities, beliefs. I think all of that contributed definitely to put me in that space where I could help in the way that I did at the time.
Everything you went through and learned from your past gave you everything you needed to deal with your present and to build your future.
Absolutely.
So what's next? Where do you move next?
Where do I move next?
We've been on this for too long.
Yes.
What's the next
we
place?
moved here, Dubai.
Dubai.
So we've been here for 7 years now. And yeah, it's been a very interesting journey being in Dubai. And I think definitely the city of opportunity.
I was just saying that. Today.
Yeah, well, I think it's one of those places you dream it, you can definitely make it happen.
Yeah.
If you have the passion and the drive to make it work. But again, I moved here with a 1-month-old baby, so my fourth child. So basically, yeah, moving here was not easy because obviously pregnant for 9 months. We had, again, in that time, moved house again. And
If
then
moving countries was enough, you're
No.
like, let's also move houses.
Move houses all the time. So we did, I think like in that time we had lived in 14 different homes in the
Wow.
different countries that we've
God.
lived in. So yeah, so then I moved to Dubai with my 1-month-old child, and that was really what my life was. You know, I had 4 children at the time, moving to a new country, a new city. But luckily I had a couple of friends that already knew here from other countries that I lived. So they had moved here already. And, you know, so for me, it was just like, I was like seeing how crazy life in Dubai is. Big, you know, super busy city, very dynamic, very, you know, and I thought, there's no way I'm going to fall into that craziness. I'm not going to go into that fast-paced lifestyle.
We all think that.
Yeah, I know. Like, I think it's something that if you move to Dubai, just listen to this. I think we all kind of like go through it. That and putting on weight because of all the amazing food. Right?
That's true.
So I thought, you know, that's it. I'm just going to enjoy my baby and just take a step back and just enjoy life and be a mum and just take it easy for a while. You know, and then I thought I would be able to bring the concept of what I created in Switzerland here. But I was not planning to dive into it straight away. Obviously, again, because of the move and everything. And also knowing that, you know, every time you move, it does take a good 6 months to a year to settle in. And then sometimes it takes about 2 years to feel like it's home. So I was really quite experienced in that sense with all the moves I had already done. So I just wanted to give myself the time to settle in before I started exploring if I was going to do anything or not. And I think really what happened was that I started joining different Facebook groups and just starting to really see a familiar pattern that was happening where, you know, a lot of the posts were about women posting, you know, I'm alone, I have no friends, I struggle to make friends, it's not easy to make genuine friendships, or like, you know, anybody want to meet for coffee. And just seeing the responses to these posts were just like so overwhelming, to be honest with you, because I thought, you know, I didn't think it'd be so hard for people to make friends here in Dubai. You know, it's an expat dominant city. You know, every other country with, you know, with I suppose maybe the UK being the exception. As expats, we bonded very quickly and we made friends very quickly.
Because there's so many people that are going through the exact same thing you're going through.
Right, exactly.
So you're like, yeah, I'd expect.
So we just kind of like connected and those friendships were formed quite quickly. So you have a community and network before you know it. Whereas I found that here, it was quite the opposite. I felt like at the time, I think things are improving now, but we're talking about 2016, 2017, where I feel like there was a huge struggle for that need. And even till today, to be honest, it's improving, but there's still, these posts are still happening. And so I thought, wow, you know, I've been there so many times. I know what it's like to move to a new country and not know anyone. I know what it means to be alone. I know what it means to feel like you don't belong and have that loss of identity, feeling a bit lost and confused and not having access, which I think I also noticed was that there were a lot of mental health issues, a lot of depression, a lot of things like this that were happening here, but people were not having access to the care that they needed, maybe for financial reasons or, you know, insurance, whatever it is that was going on in their life at the time. So I thought, okay, so, you know, I want to give back to this expat community that's given me such an amazing life. And this was my way. Again, I thought, you know, I just want to help people. And I had no expectations. It really was just like, you know, at the time I thought, what is the best way that I can reach people? Now I have this Instagram account. Maybe I can use that to be able to create these, like a YouTube channel and start promoting it on there and let people have access to this kind of information by interviewing professionals, you know, mental health counselors, talk about relationships, all those kind of like challenges that we find. So I dived into it, went to...
You became a YouTuber for a bit?
No. I did not actually reach that point. Like I did a couple of interviews. I went to an amazing company here, and they really help you create, you know, your videos. So they do all the filming and they help you kind of like build your influence, if you like, here as well. And I just remembered a few moments that kind of like stood out for me was the first time I went, they said, let's test you out. Let's put you in front of the camera and see how you are in front of the camera, and then
See if you can be an
see if you
influencer.
can, like, be, that kind of person that sits in front of the camera. And I think this was another moment when I realized I had kind of like lost myself.
Mm.
She sat me down and they started to ask me questions about me. What is your favorite so-and-so? What is this? And I swear to you, I just sat there and I went quiet. And I'm just like, do you have another question?
No way.
I can't answer that.
Really?
I kid you not. I just could not answer the questions to the point I was just like, I'm sorry, I'm just not ready. And I left and I cried because I realized that I just completely forgot who I was again. Why? I would say, yes, definitely being a mum plays a role in that, because you do get so busy with your family and you get so involved with what their needs are and everything like that. But I think this also comes with being so heavily involved in service. You're busy servicing other people's needs. You have this drive and this passion and this desire to help them as much as possible. You give so much of yourself to them that you do forget yourself. And I think this is where I found myself in that space where I just came from a space where I was giving so much of myself to other people, and then being a mum again for the fourth time. So then I had 4 children, and then moving from another country to another country. So there was a lot of stuff that happened, and I just did not take the time to kind of like realize that I forgot who I was.
Yeah.
And so
I've had that so many times. Yeah.
So it's a tough moment. But again, I think it just is a moment, an opportunity to kind of like sit back with yourself and start thinking about, what do I want? Then I had a friend that told me, you know what, there's this place that they host talks and things like that. Why don't you try something in person? Because like she was a friend and I was speaking to her a lot about what I was doing and what I'd like to achieve. And so I went and spoke to the marketing manager there. And I said to her, look, I'm thinking about, having coffee with some women and bringing in a speaker to talk about expat life and our challenges. What do you think? And she said, yep, love the idea. Let's do it next week. And I just kind of like took a step back and I said, can we do it like in a month's time? Or like, I'm not ready to do it next week. She goes, no, we have space now. Just let's just do it.
Wow.
So I went home to my husband and I said, look, she wants me to do it next week and I'm not ready. And he's like, just go for it. What have you got to lose? If you make a mistake, learn from it. There's no big deal. Just keep going. And I think my biggest fear was actually having to talk in front of people, because I'm not someone that's been I was not very strong in public speaking. And it's, even today is quite questionable, but anyway. So I think again was finding that space to step out of my comfort zone and then thinking to myself, oh my God, what if nobody comes? I'm letting my friends know and tell their friends, and I posted on my Instagram account, and I thought, what if nobody comes?
Yeah, self-doubt always comes in.
Self-doubt always comes in, and it's a scary space because I've never done a gathering before in such a formal way. And then having the expectation from this space that are giving me their venue and they're going to be sponsoring essentially the event for people to show up. And that was very, very scary for me. And so I spoke to my friend and I said to her, look, what happens if nobody comes? And she said, and this is actually a lesson that she taught me. And I say it to everybody and I live by it every day. She said to me, look, if only 3 people come and you made a difference to one person's life, you've done your job. And that for me was just like, you know what? She's right. I don't need to have a huge crowd of people to make a difference. And I think focusing on the purpose rather than the expectation is what helped me a lot. But having said that, the first meetup I had almost 35 women show up.
Wow.
And it was everything and more than I expected it to be, which is essentially is the stepping stone to how and why Coffee with an Expat is what it is today.
Wow.
I thought, okay, people don't know who I am. They have to learn to trust me. They have to understand that I'm coming from a very authentic, genuine space, that I actually want to help people. I have no expectations.
Like.
Right, I have no expectations. I don't want anything. This is not a business, etc., etc. It was really a passion for me. And it still is, but it's kind of like taken a bit of a tweak, I would say.
So in that one session, that very first session, like everything that I thought would take months to achieve happened, where people came and they were vulnerable. The emotions were very high. We were very personal. There was an element of trust and a huge need to have this space where you're not being judged, and you just felt like you belonged and that people understood you. And it was just like a very, very defining moment. And so I thought, okay, so this is a space that people need. Ended up doing another one a month later, and another one a month later, and then I thought, okay, a lot of these ladies want to socialize as well, so why don't we do like a coffee morning so we can have the social aspect, because the talks were very interesting, but they're quite heavy as well because they're very intense and very emotional, and we're talking about topics that are touching our emotions, right? And so from the coffee morning, and then we started doing that, and then COVID happened. And so I
think this was my coping mechanism, was to push it all online. I already had a Facebook group, a global Facebook group, so I just pushed it all online and started every single day for 6 weeks, nonstop. I had
every single day for 6 weeks?
I had a speaker on there. We were talking about different topics. I had an opera singer come on, and she sang opera to us from her home.
Oh my God.
We just kind of like...
How did you find so many speakers?
Well, when you have a network of expat women, there are so many speakers and so many skilled professionals and people that have something to share. Everyone has a story to tell.
Wow.
So there's never a lack of people to come on and
meeting every day for 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
So that's what we did. And then it kind of like I burnt myself out, so then I had to stop for a bit, and then we still kept on doing stuff online, but it was like once or twice a week. Until
still really good and a lot.
Yeah, so it was just a way of me coping, I think, and also for me still maintaining community, that sense of community that I felt like we all needed at the time as well, because of I think we all felt a bit scared and lost during the COVID time, and just wanted to feel connected to people. And so then when the opportunity came to go back into person, we jumped right back into it. Started meeting face to face, and it's very interesting to see how that evolved. Obviously, when you first meet face to face, nobody's touching anybody, everyone's got the masks on, and it was just everyone's quite scared still.
Learning how to socialize again.
Learning how to socialize again, and kind of like be in that space again. So it was very interesting. And then obviously, throughout this whole time, I was also licensed. So I did have a lot of as a business, you have to have a license, and all these kind of things.
So that's when you decided, let's make this a business.
Well, I had to actually. It's not because I really wanted to at the time, but I felt like if I'm going to make this a sustainable community and keep my passion and purpose alive, and be able to do what I'm doing, I have to be generating an income from it to be able to at least cover the costs and maintain what I'm doing, to be able to give back more and to be able to do more, right? So the way I thought I could go about this without jeopardizing what I've created.
Because it's tough, right? It's like this beautiful passion, like purpose thing, and then you're like... Putting money into it is always a bit of a... It's a
tricky one. It's a tricky one. And I think for me it was really important that I didn't lose that, the essence of what I've created. Yeah. And also making it a community. For me, a community is accessible to everybody, because it's not a community if it's only for a certain group, or like it can be if it's known that this is for this purpose. But for me, I wanted it to be a community available to all women. And I think this is what's beautiful about the diversity of what we have now, is that we have women from mainly 25 up to 60 plus sometimes as well. So, and we all get along, and it's just very interesting, the kind of conversations that we have and the things that we learn from each other. So it's been a very beautiful experience. So that's basically where I decided to create a membership, where then I think it was a good move as well, because it really kind of like brought the community more together and really get the sense of community, that we belong to something that they have invested in, not only just financially, but they're also investing their time and their energy and their emotions and thoughts and everything, because it's a community built by the community, and this is what I wanted to see happen, because it's not about me, it's about the women that are part of this community, that are essentially helping me run all the different groups that we have, and keep things moving and connecting with the other members. So it's really been an amazing journey.
One thing I would say is that for anyone that's starting something of their own, in order for you to achieve greatness and have an impact, it doesn't mean that you have to do something big and grand.
True.
And then on the flip side, just because you're doing something that's really big and grand doesn't mean it's going to be great and it's going to have a big impact.
True.
And so the key is to start. Even if you go to a beautiful garden and you see all these beautiful plants and flowers, it starts with a bunch of really small seeds. But okay, so with Coffee with an Expat, tell me, it starts off as this thing where, you know, you're building a community, the COVID thing happens, you create the membership. What happens then? What, like, does it stay as one group? Does it disperse into different groups? What's the current status of it now?
Yes, so while I was creating the community and having this idea that I should have a membership, it was largely inspired by another community I was part of, like I told you, in the States, where there was a very, very similar setup. And that really inspired me. And I thought, you know, why can't I try and do something similar here? Because it was so beautiful to bring people together. And it just meant that people were able to connect at a deeper level, I would say, because when somebody says or asks, how do I meet people? How do I make friends? The usual advice would be join a club that you are interested in, go do, you know, yoga, if that's what you like to do, join a book club, etc., etc. So I thought, okay, well then, you know, again, for me, it was about observing first and foremost what is happening already with what I've created, and how are these connections happening, and if they are happening at all, because again, I was very conscious of always coming back to my sole purpose, and this was for women to connect and make genuine friendships. And again, being in Dubai and the fast pace and so much happening, it's very easy to lose grasp of your purpose and get caught up in the, you know, the different events and things that you should be, where you think you should be doing, but and you lose your way in a way. And that's happened to me a few times, and I've always had to.
It's tougher to create a community in a city.
It's hard. It is hard, and it takes time.
But you have to step back in order for you to do that.
Well, you have to step back. I think in any business, really, sometimes you just need to step back and reevaluate what is that you're doing. What is the core purpose? Why did you start this? And are you still on that path?
That's so key. I think money is very important. You need it. But if there's a difference, and I think before money always comes purpose, because there has to be a purpose of why you want it and what you want to do with it, right? So purpose is definitely, you need to constantly reevaluate your purpose and how you're living, and are you living a purposeful life? Are you purposely doing things that is aligned with your purpose?
True. And I think, again, coming back to what I was saying before, is that I'm very blessed to have I'm very blessed to have the privilege to be able to do that, right? Some people can only focus on money because this is what they need for their
That's true, actually, yeah.
Right?
It's also privilege.
So again, just being, for me, I'm very aware of that, that sometimes people can't have the luxury of following their passion because they have to support a family. So, you know, for me, it was really about reevaluating that, and, you know, refocusing that energy in the right way. And I think, again, was letting go was a big part of it. Letting go of what other people are doing, letting go of what people expect, letting go of what this community and that community and these new communities popping up everywhere, just letting go of all of that, because for me, that just added pressure and noise that was not servicing me as a person. And when it's not servicing me as a person, it's impacting how I deliver my service to others. And so I had to be very conscious of that and let all of that go and just think, you know what, it doesn't matter what everyone else is doing. I know what I want for this community. I know what this community needs. I'm going to listen to what the community or the members of the community are saying to me, or how they are behaving, and what their expectations are, and focus on that. And that has helped me so much, because it just relieves a lot of the stress, and it enabled me to be able to just really just give everything that I wanted to give into the community.
I think every business owner should think about exactly that, you know, once in a while. Like you're talking about community for a corporate company, about your employees. Like, yeah, I think every person needs to reevaluate that.
Absolutely. I think it's important. I think it just really brings back the whole purpose and meaning, and I think people feel more valued as well, if you're talking corporate as well, that there is that sense of care and recognition of their needs. Because, like, you spend most of your life working in these corporations, right? So that's another conversation.
Yeah. What I do love, though, is community is a big part of your life, and you do mention it a lot. But at the same time, there's always a moment where you come back to yourself. And I think that's important, that even though you have a community, you should and you can come back to yourself. And doing that will have a positive impact in the way you are with your community and how you build your community, what you do with your community, and the health of the community as well. Yeah, that's something I want to keep in mind as well.
Yeah. I think it comes back to everything that I learned as well through everything we've talked about today, is the importance of valuing myself, and also understanding my role in this life is I have responsibilities, right, to my family, to my children, to my parents, to my siblings, to my community, and also to myself. And I've experienced what it felt like too many times to not know who I am, to neglect myself, even from the way I dressed, from the way I did my hair, or the way everything was neglected at some point. And again, it was all part of this cycle of this never-ending change and adapting to different circumstances in different countries and having children and relearning and reliving all these kind of things you do. It's a lot, actually. When I'm talking to you, I think back and look back at everything I'm saying. It's like, wow, it's been a lot. A lot to kind of like go through. So
8 countries, 14 houses.
So I think you really learn that at the end of the day, you can only give your best self when you're in a good space.
Yeah.
Okay. And it's really important that we don't feel guilty about that. And I think and I don't know for men, maybe you can let me know, but I know for a lot of women, we have this element of guilt that we sometimes are looking after ourselves, that we take time for ourselves and have that self-care moment, as a parent. It does. I don't know why we feel this. I definitely have felt that, but you work through it and realize, no, I have that right to have time to myself. I have that right to look after myself and spoil myself and do this and do that.
That's actually a really interesting, topic. I think it's the fact that women, from my very limited, understanding, a sense of community and dyads is something, even psychologically, men spend more time in chit-chatting, which, they say women do that. Men actually spend more time when we're younger doing that. But at the age of 11 and 12, there's a switch. Women start doing it more and men start doing it less. So as a woman, community is always, more important. But also maybe coming from Eastern culture, part of his Eastern culture, it's like community and family is like a big thing, right? So you're constantly in this mode of service to others.
Right.
So I think as a man, we're a little bit more selfish.
Yes.
I think we pride in having that time to ourselves, and for us, that's like what community is for you guys is like what being with ourselves and having that time in solitude, like that's what it is for us. So I think we're a bit more selfish with that, but also I don't know how much of it we look at as self-care, right? I think that intentions are so important, right?
Absolutely.
You could do anything, but if your intentions are not right, then, so I don't think men look at that time as self-care enough.
I also wouldn't say it's selfish, to be honest with you, in all fairness. I mean, like, it's not like as if you're, I just think that men and women are built differently, in the way our emotions, the way we think, the way we behave, the motherly instincts, all those kind of things is what makes us essentially different, right?
Yeah.
And I think, I'm speaking for myself as a mum, I take that responsibility of being a mother for my children and being a wife for my husband and being a daughter to my parents. And that looks very different to every single individual, right? So, and again, I think when you give so much of yourself to others, and I think this is probably where it comes from as well, is that I've always been a giver. I've always been a listener, and it's just who I am naturally. So I think this is why when I fell into this volunteering my time to the refugees, I think this is like you were saying, it's like where I actually found where I belonged, because this is who I am actually.
Yeah.
And I think that when you're somebody that gives so much, you sometimes feel bad giving to yourself.
Yeah.
It's hard to explain, I suppose. I'm like, I don't know if you understand where I'm coming from.
No, I get it.
It's just it's one of those things that you kind of like.
I get it, but not to the extent that you've lived it.
Right.
Because you're a mother and a wife, which I know nothing about. I definitely never will know about that. So it's a very different, but I do get it. I do get it from a very limited standpoint. Something I hope I learn about in the future. But what is Coffee with an Expat come now? Because I know there's more groups now, right?
Yes, we have more groups now. So once you join the community, you have access to several groups that we have within the community. So we have within the community some really, really amazing subgroups, and it caters, I hope, to most people's interests as well and needs. So we have like the gourmet group for the foodies. We have a mums group for the mums in the group for the parents. We have a health and wellness for, it speaks for itself, health and wellness. We have arts and culture. We have a very special group called the POD Mums Group, which is the People of Determination Mums Group, which is a very, very special group within the community as well. And then I think we have book club and from my head, I can't remember. So, but those were you get the gist basically. So we have different subgroups, and we are open to always adding new groups if we feel that there is an interest or a need. And this is, comes back to listening to the community, seeing what's needed, what's wanted, what's interesting. So we need
something like this for men.
Yeah.
Book club, I've been wanting to do something like that. We need some communities for men as well. But I love that. I love that you. So, what does someone? How does someone get the membership? How do they know about all the groups? Is there like an Instagram page? I mean, I know your Instagram page, but is there like how? Okay, so if let's say I'm a mom, and I want to be a part of a community, how would I know about all these groups and get in touch if I don't have the privilege that I have now sitting with you?
Okay, so we have a website. So it's CoffeeWithAnExpat.com, and from there you'll see who we are, the kind of things that we do, access to read more about the membership if you're interested to become a member.
Is there a gold membership and a silver and a bronze?
No, we only have one membership.
That's inclusive. I like that.
Yeah, we have one membership at a very affordable price point as well, again, because I wanted it to be accessible to the majority. And then obviously we post all of our meetups and events on the website as well. But once you join the membership, then you have access to a private platform that's just for members. So it's kind of like our own Facebook, if you like, where you can connect with other members, you can chat with members online, you can join the various groups that you're interested in. We post different articles. This podcast, for example, would go on there. It's a source of information, a source of discussion. So we have that online connection as well. And there's also where we post the member-only events. So then we have a lot of things that we do just for members.
So you ended up making the blog?
Well, kind of.
With the articles. Yeah, you did it in the end.
Kind of. So we're essentially a growing community, a growing and evolving community. Again, I think with community, you're always evolving, to be honest with you, because times change and people's needs change as well. So it's not very complicated to kind of like find out who we are and how to join the network.
Okay.
All on the website.
So I want to talk about the concept of home.
Okay.
You've lived in more countries than a lot of people in this world have ever been to just to visit. And And I'm going to read a quote that I actually wrote out before I came here. I think the most relatable thing I could say to describe the expat experience is like you're living in a house, but it doesn't necessarily feel like home at the moment. And you've talked about living in so many countries. So what is home for you? And yeah, what is home for you?
You know, I love this question. I don't actually. Yeah, I think it's a very common question to expats that get asked. And I think a lot of us don't like it because it's a very difficult question to ask. And yes, you're right. I have lived in a lot of countries and I've traveled extensively. But I think when you are so involved and you're living amongst the expat community, so many people have lived the same way as well. So sometimes you, like you just said, sometimes you forget that actually we are a minority in this world of people that have lived in so many different parts of the world. And like, yeah, I mean, like home, it is a tough question because when you are considered a serial expat, if you like, and you know, apart from like I was saying before, moving country, you also move house within the countries. It's very hard to feel like you have a physical home anywhere. And so, you know, for me, there's a lot of, I suppose, elements that make home. And for me, it was just really discovering and realizing that home does not have to be physical, right? And having that detachment from the physical side of what home is and what you've been taught home should be, is that it's a space that you live in, right? You know, you always, you know, for people that have always lived in one country, for example, they have their home, and that's they're attached to their home. And so when you see this growing up in the media and in the movies, home is supposed to be a place that you stay in and you live in, and this is where you call home.
Interesting. I would call that a house.
Right. Well, for a lot of people, when you say anything, you say, I'm going home. So you do subconsciously.
I'm going to my house.
Or you say, you're going to your house.
Yeah.
Really? That's super interesting.
Because that's what I mean. Like for me, I mean, I say I'm going to my house, but what I'm going to say is different. I think there's a difference between a house and a home. You could have 100 houses.
Yes.
But some of them may not feel like home.
Exactly. And so that's interesting that you say that, because maybe the house that you're in isn't actually your home.
Yeah.
Right? And
what makes it your home?
That's super interesting, because now when we travel anywhere, even at a hotel, we say we're going back home. Let's go back home, even if it's a hotel. And I think it comes down to the point where, you know, really understanding what home meant to me anyway. So home for me was really a journey within myself, and realizing that home is inside me and it's not connected to any physical place.
Wow.
You know, and that was a huge moment for me, because then I think that really helped me a lot, navigating the different countries, being able to adapt to the different countries, being able to, you know, not have that like sense of loss of identity and sense of loss of belonging. I'm not going to say 100%, because obviously I'm a human being. You know, I'm going to have those challenges everywhere I go, but it definitely helped me navigate those moments that I'm faced with. Because I think once you kind of like go through this process of relocation once, twice, 3 times, you start to see the pattern that happens with you, and you're fully aware that it's going to happen, but you just have no control over it. You just can't control what's going to come, but you just learn how to navigate through it. And that sometimes it's hard, because it's kind of like you hit rock bottom and you're like, I know this is going to happen. And then you kind of like, okay, but this is what I need to do to pick myself up again. And so for me, it was all about the feeling of feeling home, right? And it's that connection to the word feeling, because when we say, where do you feel like it's home, we're talking about how you feel. And so I've connected that feeling to having home inside of myself. So wherever I go, no matter where I am, you know, I have my family with me. I have myself, and I have the things that I need, which are just the essentials. Home can be anywhere, really. So yeah, so that's where home is for me.
I love that, within yourself.
Yeah, within myself. I mean, like being here in Dubai now, 7 years. It's the longest place we've stayed anywhere. I'm starting to feel a lot more settled. But if you say, are you going to stay, is this going to be your home? I always say, I don't know.
I'm already in my home.
Right. Right. I don't know if it's going to be my physical home. I just don't know. Being an expat, you never know what's going to happen tomorrow, right? So for now, it's home. But is it my home? Is it, because like if you say, well, where are you from? It's very different to where home is. Yeah, I'm from Australia. I was born and raised there, but I'm also Egyptian.
Yeah.
Because my parents are Egyptian. This is where I'm from, right? But is it home? I can't say I'm Australian and I can't say I'm Egyptian.
I struggle with that sometimes because when I go to India, I'm like, I'm one of you, and they're like, no, not really. And
you don't get the jokes.
You don't get the jokes. You don't sound like us. You have braids. Yeah, you're not one of us. And when I come to Dubai, I was born here. I've lived here all my life, but I'm not Emirati.
Yeah.
So it's a mix. I feel that as well.
Yeah. And it's really, I think life is just a continuous journey of learning and growing and rediscovering yourself. And I thought, I think one of the things that I really realized and struggled with here actually was stability.
Because you've already moved so many times.
Right.
So now when you're here for more than 2 years, it's like, where next?
What's next? That's right.
Should I move houses?
Exactly.
Now?
And that's exactly what happened to me, actually. So we lived here for a year. We purchased a house and we moved. We thought, okay, that's it. We're going to kind of like settle. And that was for me, what's fine. It's kind of like, also at the same time, you get tired from all of the moving and all the change, all that kind of stuff that happens. So I thought, oh, great, we'll actually have our own home. Finally, we can do it the way we like, etc., and make it home. But then I found myself, like I said, 2 years in, I'm like, is this really it? That's it, I'm not moving again? Maybe we can move. Maybe we can just go somewhere and try a different country. And I was actively looking for change, like actively looking at different countries, different opportunities. Maybe my husband's job has a branch there. And I was like convincing myself that this change is going to happen. And then I started changing furniture around the house. Like, I swear to you, in the middle of the night, 2:00 in the morning, I'd get up and start moving furniture around. My kids would be looking at me like...
Your kids like, Dad, I don't know what's happening with Mom.
Mom, what are you doing? It's 2:00 in the morning. I'm like, yeah, look, just leave me alone.
Yeah.
Just let me do what I need to do. And that was how deeply rooted I was connected to change, the need for it. And I realized after a while that I was actually struggling with the concept of stability. Like, I couldn't accept being stable in one space. And that was another journey that I had to work through. Really, it was really a challenge, knowing that this could be it. I'm not like moving countries again, possibly, or maybe not for the foreseeable future. Yeah.
Okay, so advice for expats. What is your advice that when you move to a new country, I mean, the whole podcast has been about that in a way, but because for me, and I have another quote, to make the transition smoother, the quote is, home is where my habits have a habitat. There are two things that have always helped me every single time, and whenever I move to a new place, these two things are what I look for. The two things are community, which you've already spoken about, and then habits and routine. Those are the two things that I think whichever country I'm in, those are two things that I need to like focus on in order for me to make the place a home for me. What would you say would ease the transition of moving into a new country?
To a new country. I think nowadays it's relatively easier, I would say, in the sense that there's so many resources out there and so many different ways of connecting with people. And I always advise people to have community, like you said, online and offline. So find your online community in the country that you're moving to, and also global expat communities. So then wherever you go, you're connected to the community that you're establishing online. And the benefits of having an online community locally as well means that you have access to information, to ask your questions, to know where everything is, all those kind of things. It's also a way to meet people through these online communities but I think it's really important to find the community that works for you. There are a lot of big communities that you may feel very lost in. So sometimes finding the smaller, intimate kind of like online communities are probably the best way to go if it's available to you. And then, yes, definitely finding your offline community in person, be it through things that you do out of habit, like if it's a sport, if it's arts, whatever it is that you do, is try to find a community. And I think like a place like Dubai, there's community for almost everything here.
Yeah.
If you're in arts and culture, you're into sports, whatever it is that you want to do, I think there's always a small community around that. So I think definitely finding that space where you feel you could belong to, or is even using it as a stepping stone to find out more. Because sometimes when you move to a city, you find that, yeah, okay, I love to do yoga, for example, I'm going to go join this yoga class, but you may find that the people there that are not really your people. So maybe through that you will find another group. And I think it's really about being open to and adapting to change, and stepping out of your comfort zone, really stepping out into the city and discovering. It would be my advice to people is definitely just go out there and find your space, because it's not easy. It does require work. It does require some confidence. And what's the worst that's going to happen?
I love that. Well, so we've reached a interesting part of the podcast. I have a segment called Late Night Thoughts. It's created by my producer Yasmin. And so the podcast usually ends up getting deep because it's just my guests and also me. We have a bunch of questions that I ask on the podcast. I have no idea what any of these questions are.
Okay.
You pick one, I'll pick one, and then we both answer both of them.
So we answer the question, or I ask you the question?
Both of us answer both questions.
Both questions.
Yeah.
Okay, so should I read mine out?
Yeah.
Okay, so mine says, so I'm going to ask you the question and then I'll answer after you, okay? If you could create a holiday, what would it be and how would it be celebrated?
Wow. If I could create a holiday.
Like I suppose like a national or global, international holiday.
This is tough.
It's a
this
hard
is
one.
So tough.
It is.
Maybe International Meditation Day. International Meditation Day, and we would celebrate mindfulness, and on the day everyone would have to meditate for an hour. That's my day.
Nice. I like that one.
That's yours.
Okay.
Is there an expat day?
There isn't, but that was not what I was going to say, actually.
Okay,
That's a good one. I don't know how the expat day would be celebrated.
Go move to another country.
Exactly. Time to relocate.
Have another kid.
Exodus of people moving on expat day. Can you imagine? Oh my gosh. Oh God, that just gives me anxiety. I think based on our conversation today and a lot of the things that we're speaking about, I would create a acts of service holiday day.
Wow, okay.
Where everybody would need to go out and do an act of service.
Well, I have some groundbreaking news for you.
Does it exist already?
In February, there's Random Acts of Kindness Week. So I will have to work very hard to make my International Meditation Day a thing. You have some foundation already to make yours a thing.
Okay.
But that's a good one.
Yeah.
That's really good. I like that.
Okay.
Okay, mine is, would you rather always be the smartest or the best looking person in the room?
Oh God. Smartest. I think beauty's skin deep. I think there's so much more to a person than looks.
I feel like smartest is just the right answer to go for.
He's gonna go for the best looking.
But is it like a one-time thing or like in general, every room? Every room. This is an interesting question because there's a difference between being smart and being wise. Being smart...
Well, it depends on your definition of smart, right?
Being smart means knowing a lot of things. Being wise is knowing when to use those things and how to use your knowledge.
Right.
So I would
I think also it comes down to who will you attract in that room based on those two options.
Yeah. Okay, since I'd rather be wise rather than being smart, and since you've already said the smart thing, I want to be the best looking person in the room.
So then we can stand next to each other. You can do the posing.
Yeah.
I'll do the talking.
Yeah. I think right now you're beating me at both, but it's okay. We'll take
Not
it.
at all.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Navine, for
Thank
coming
you.
on. I'm so appreciative of your time, and I hope anyone that is an expat that's finding their journey hard and, you know, that's finding it tough, find something in this episode. And please, please, please send her a text on Instagram, follow her. What are all your pages and
Coffee with an Expat. So just look up Coffee with an Expat on Instagram. It's my website as well. We have a Facebook page. You can connect with me directly on LinkedIn as Navine Aldasuki. We also have a Facebook group, which is a global expat group for women. It's called Coffee with Expat Women. Yeah, that's it.
Oh, I love that. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.